Evelyn, thank you so much for joining us today for our key topic of empowering women in leadership through digital visibility. So, hello, Evelyn. Did you just want to start with giving a quick introduction into who you are and some context as to how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and it's lovely to meet you. A
Likewise.
little bit. So, a little bit about myself. I am actually originally from Zimbabwe, but I am US based now. And my journey through digital marketing has really been very up and down. I think, like most people's careers, it's never quite linear. So that's been my background. I originally started in internal communications and ventured into social media for fun. I was one of those early adopters, like the content creators, right when Instagram started.
OG.
Yeah, I was in that wave. So from then on, really, it just became emerging of the creative and the professional all at the same time. So I took what I loved in my, creative moments as a content creator and brought that into the professional space and continued just finding different ways to apply that. So went into marketing. From then, I went into digital marketing. And so now I lead digital marketing for my current employer. So, but I still creatively write on LinkedIn. I still enjoy content creation. So that's a little bit about my background in digital marketing.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's nice to know that we have another marketer whose sort of path isn't as linear. So we're
Yeah.
all in the club. So I guess I just wanted to sort of break down, the reason why we're discussing today. So empowering women in leadership through digital visibility. And I'm interested to hear your approach to digital visibility. So could you share how you've used digital platforms to support women and amplify their voices? And how your sort of varied background in, social media, marketing, communications has amplified that.
Sure. I think a lot of the times women are really afraid to be in front of the camera and to be seen. We overthink the whole being perceived thing.
Mm,
And I've run into that with a lot of executives that I've worked with, women executives that I've worked with, where there's a fear of, well, I'm not really sure what I'll talk about or how to even build a brand or how to even engage. And then I go, well, we can create a system and a process for that for you. But the goal really is to put your voice out there, to amplify what you care about, your passions, your story, because we never really quite move through our careers on our own. There
mm,
are people who set the stage for us, and I feel it's really our responsibility through every stage to do the same for the people behind us. So I have always, whether that's from a creative space or professional space, creatively, personally, I've always been a writer. So, right when Instagram started, I went into writing about motherhood and
mm,
my experiences as a Black immigrant woman in the US who was also trying to build a career in all this marketing and communication spaces. But the
mm.
way I wrote about it on Instagram was very much like a big sister,
Yeah.
you know, like a big sister and a dear friend. And I mixed in some of my own personal stories about what it looked a day in my life, taking my kids to school, or when I was in graduate school, taking my kids to school, a day in my life, bringing my kids to work, a day in my life, bringing my kids along in content creation. I have two
Mhm.
content creators now in my house. That's me and my son. Uh,
Oh.
so that was the personal. And so once I got into the professional and realized that, wait a minute, men are not afraid to be thought leaders out there. They're not afraid to put themselves out there and say, the content doesn't even have to be perfect. And even as an executive, I don't have to know exactly what's needed of me. But if someone else is guiding me, sure, I'll put myself out there. And so what I've tried to do in every position that I've had where I'm supporting a women executive is tell me what you're passionate about outside of work. Tell me your story. What
Hmm.
brought you to where you are now? Now, let's find the mutual ground between those stories. And maybe you want to serve as a brand ambassador for your organization. How then do we create thought leadership pieces around all of those interests and then help your LinkedIn brand grow, as well as, direct some of the traffic to your organization as well? Because some of the most interesting brands have leadership that is engaged on a social level,
Yes,
social media level. And people do actually enjoy hearing from executives. So, as women, if we're in those positions, we have stuff to share, we have things to say. Let's go ahead and do that as well.
absolutely. And I'm in sort of total agreement there. I think, there are more voices to be heard in this, and to just have the courage to start perhaps is the hardest thing. But once you're there, I mean,
Yeah.
look at you now.
And I think a lot of the time people overthink the outcome and dwell too much on the, well, what's the actual outcome? And I will be the first one to say out there are those of us who obsess about, the metrics and the analytics of things,
Yeah.
data. But the reason why I wanted to participate in this conversation is because really I want women to know that digital visibility is about living a footprint, your digital footprint that serves
Mm.
almost like your ancestral memory. When you transition out of a career, when you get to a point where you retire, when other women who are coming behind you get online and they're looking for certain subjects and topics, they can find your voice long after you're not even doing that stuff anymore. So it's setting things up that way and not thinking so much about the, what if people don't like my content? What if people don't engage? Somebody's always watching. So do it anyways.
I hear that. I hear that, and thank you for sharing that with me. And I guess I'm interested to hear your opinion on what the potential challenges and barriers can be. So we sort of touched on a couple here with, sort of imposter syndrome, sort of authenticity versus perception. Could you sort of lay out, your top three challenges that either you've seen or something that you've experienced yourself in this sort of area?
Sure. So I think a lot of the times with women leaders, it's not knowing where to start or how to start.
Mm,
That's the biggest challenge, like thinking about it, but not knowing where to start.
yeah.
And the second one being, of course, the imposter syndrome. Um,
Mm,
am I qualified to speak in this space or on this subject or topic? Because in a way, if you are putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, for example, you are kind of claiming your territory as far as like your subject expertise, but that's okay. I really do believe that um, the expert is a continuous learner. That's someone who is continuously
mm,
learning and exploring new things within the subject, right? You're never quite the master if you are not, you're never quite the master if you are someone who's just like, you know what? I figured it all out. I know it all now.
mm,
Because even the master still has to like submit him or herself as a student to their craft, So I think the imposter syndrome and not knowing when to start, and then sometimes not really knowing what to say.
mm,
What do I even say? Well, start with what interests you every single day. When you wake up and you look through the news or you're reading a book, does it trigger something in your creative memory to go, I really like that? The things that are easy to talk about are the things that bring joy to you, the
yeah.
things that make your heart feel um, so angry when you feel like, well, no, things shouldn't be that way. Write about that. Alchemize your rage, alchemize your love, your passion, alchemize the joy around all aspects of your life. And you will find that it's easier to actually find things to talk about and write about.
Absolutely. And I really like the way you just described that in terms of, really looking inward and seeing what makes your heart sing. And I think that's really important to share with people that are having those feelings of, oh, I have this feeling that I do want to have more of a digital presence, but didn't know where to start. And I guess in your experience, was there sort of a turning point as to when you either sort of heard that, or you started sort of doing that for yourself? And yeah, talk to me a little bit more about how, yeah, you got started.
Sure. So, because I kind of started from the creative space, not kind of, I did start from the creative space where when I was an undergrad, I was documenting my outfits every day because I love thrifting, you know.
Yeah.
I love thrifting and I love putting clothes together and I love playing with hair. I started documenting that and sharing on a blog. But then when I had children, I hit that wall that most mothers hit, well, who am I now? And how do I express myself creatively?
Mm.
And I realized that, wait a minute, I actually do enjoy writing. And it happened by accident. I just started writing on Instagram and people started following and engaging. And then the following and the engagement led to DMs where people were sharing their entire life stories with me simply because of what I was writing, you know. And I found this community of women who were leaders, who were mothers, who were sisters, who were friends, that were just like, yeah, we're existing in the shadows. And I thought, oh, well, thank you for engaging with my content because this tells me that I'm doing something right just by being vulnerable and writing on Instagram. So that's how I got started. But it was really hard to put the same approach in a professional space because
Mm.
once you go to the professional space, you are now saying, oh, no, I'm really the subject,
Yeah.
subject ex- expert on this specific topic. But then one day I realized, wait a minute, I am a lifelong learner. That same love I have when it comes to learning about life and motherhood and friendship and sisterhood, I have that same love as an academic. I'm a scholar by nature. Communications is my area of study. What does that mean? It means I stay curious with everything I do. So then I decided to start writing on LinkedIn. I created a newsletter called The Global Villager because I wanted to talk about the workplace as a space for community.
Mm.
And I wanted to talk about how in the Western world, there's this distinction between your work life and your professional life, where I came from. I
Yeah.
have uncles and aunts who raised me, but I'm not related to them by blood or ancestorship or anything. They were people my mom became really good friends with at work in Zimbabwe.
Hmm.
And I grew up seeing those people and I grew up watching them navigate life together, both personally and professionally. So when I decided to create the Global Villager, I was coming from that place of, could we do business differently? Could we put heart into business? Could we put heart into leadership? Could we put heart into equity? And so you see a pattern already forming here. I'm still
Yeah.
talking about things that I'm passionate about, just not on Instagram. But now I've adapted my messaging to LinkedIn, to the audience on LinkedIn. But I haven't lost my authenticity about what I care about and what I'm passionate about. I've just found another area to explore. So that's how my journey has been for me.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I guess one of the key sort of takeaways I took from that is you being sort of a lifelong learner and always being a student. And I think that's such a brilliant way to sort of look at the whole, way of work. And I'm sort of interested in the idea that being a student and learning, you sometimes make mistakes. And often being online, a lot of people may fear of making those mistakes and not keeping up with that sort of perfect online image.
Mhm.
And as somebody that has experienced this yourself, how have you sort of balanced your sort of authentic self and your passions with perhaps the pressure to be this perfect online personality? Like how have you dealt with that?
So one of the most beautiful things about being true to yourself is you do own your story all the time. When you're true to yourself, there are some things that do happen. You're true to yourself, you
Mm.
own your story, and you move with courage. I actually created some statements that guide my life. So one of those statements is I'm on a mission to fail, because if I fail, then I know that I'm actually living. I'm experiencing the joys of living in the suffering that comes with failing. There's joy also somewhere. So for me, it's I go deep all the time in every area of my life. So balancing the perfectionism that can come with being online, I will share this with you. When I was writing on Instagram, I used to share about my family and what I did as a mother and how I was a homemaker, right? And how my husband was very supportive of my career. But then I went through a divorce, and that story had to change. And now I wasn't, this woman with all of her ducks in a row, and she
Hmm.
looks like she's got the wife and the mother and the professional all together. Now I was really writing about being human as a woman,
Mm.
you know. And so because I gave myself permission to go into that space, people actually do come with you if you are very authentic to you. People can sense that, they can feel that. And so on LinkedIn, for example, one of my favorite person is the Spanx founder, Blake.
Hmm.
I love her style of writing and the way she shares her content as a leader. She puts it all out there. This is what it is. You come along for the journey. You either love it or you don't, but still there's value in what I'm saying. And so as women, we have to get to that point where overcome the guilt. Sometimes we guilt ourselves before
Mm.
anybody has even said anything to us. Overcome the
Absolutely.
shame. I love Brene Brown's work on shame and vulnerability, that they cannot coexist.
Yeah.
If you're going to be authentic, those cannot coexist. But the biggest one is, if you decide to go through this journey, it's realizing that, wait a minute, I'm not even doing it for anybody else. I'm doing it for myself because I have something to say, and I'm not perfect. And embrace your humanity. Like, we're all, I like to call it walking each other home. The end goal is the same. We're all headed in the same direction. But while we're on this journey and we're walking each other home, it's okay to
Yeah.
union together and share the imperfections and the moments that seem perfect. That's okay too. If you're just authentic in that voice, in that space, people do actually tend to, before you know it, people are defending your story in rooms that you're not even
Yeah.
walking in. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And you sort of just mentioned there that being sort of vulnerable and sharing that can sort of build that community aspect as well. And I'm interested to know how sort of community building and as well as mentorship, whether you've had a specific experience that has influenced your leadership presence, whether that's in a online community, a specific mentor. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Oh, so as someone who grew up in a collective culture in Zimbabwe and then transitioned to living in the West where it's very individualistic, this is a space of tension for me
Okay.
continuously. It's a space of tension continuously because I require community in everything I do.
Mm.
I ask for community in every space I walk in. I lead the building and nurturing of community in every space I occupy, as a leader, as a teammate, as a part of like a communal space within my family or in activities. I am always championing community and mentorship for one thing, for one reason. In the Lion King, when they talk about the circle of life,
Yep.
yeah, okay, okay.
I
So
know that one.
most of us grew up really joking about the circle of life, but the circle of life exists specifically for community and mentorship. That's what it exists for. The old was once young. And so,
Mm.
because he was once young or she was once young, she understands all the challenges that a young mother, a young woman, a young leader could potentially be struggling with. So because they went through some of those things, they come back down and reach a hand and say, hey, actually, I used to walk that journey and this is what I did. And then the young, because we're still so full of life and excitement and zeal about life and how to change the world, our place in that circle is to continue the progress.
Mm.
And then those who are in the middle, they are taking both from the old and the young to continue the balance, to hold the balance, you know. So in that circle of life, there is community happening. We're doing life together in professional spaces. We're building each other in women's leadership circles. And we're also mentoring each other. Sometimes mentoring, it's not even necessarily speaking to a person. It's you doing what you do and not even knowing that somebody else is watching.
Very true. Very
Yeah.
true.
And so
And
I've had mentors by just going on YouTube and looking up somebody that really is inspiring, and I watch their videos. One of my favorite people is Ursula Burns. She's the
yeah.
former CEO of Xerox. I
Mhm.
love the way she communicates and expresses herself. And I've watched her and learned so much about how to have resilience as a woman leader. But I've never met her and I've never talked to her. And she doesn't know I exist. You
You never know. You never know.
right. But then,
That's
yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just saying that's really interesting because I was going to ask, for people that are watching and perhaps
Mhm.
want to build in that community aspect where it's not in either their natural personality or environment, how they would seek that. And I just find it really interesting how, you sort of sort out people that you look up to and role models, and they don't know sort of who you are. Well, you never know, but but you're able to gain that insight. And I just want to say I think that's something really worth sharing. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think in the building, at work, for example, um, if you're going to build a community, you have to be really good at listening. And when I say listening, I don't mean with just your ears. You have to hear people's hearts when they speak. You have to be able to hear the unspoken, and
Mm,
you have to be able to pay attention to body language. That way, every time you see that person, you start the conversation with something that matters to them. And that's
absolutely.
how you nurture relationships. So even if you're a woman leader, um, our natural default sometimes as women is to be the nurturers, right? But you can put boundaries around that. And to your point about the introverts, the shy ones among us, what do? You can It's okay to tell people, actually, this is not my nature, but I'm so interested in what you were saying, and I would love to learn more. Tell people those things. And you'll be amazed at how, if you told people, I'm really not the most outgoing person, but I'm always so curious what other people think. And I heard you speaking about A, B, C, and D, or you're wearing this lovely color on you. Compliments work all the time. And I
Mm,
would love to hear more. Started that way. If you were talking to someone like me who's an extrovert, we're gonna start pouring ourselves to you. And now you are just doing what you do best, which is hearing and taking in the information that matters to nurture that relationship. So that's one way to do it, whether it's you're in a remote environment or you are in person with people at networking events. Lean into the things that we think sometimes are our weaknesses, really is where our superpower is sometimes. So lean into those things.
love that, and thank you for sharing. I feel like people that are listening and perhaps, aren't the sort of outrovert type hear that and think, okay, that's one way I can build that community and insight. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. And I guess what I'm interested in is sort of looking into the future and knowing that the space we work in is ever changing, if not daily. So let alone in 5-10 years time. And I'm interested to know, what trends do you see shaping the future of women's leadership visibility?
I am loving the wave of women who are going into venture capital. I love
Hmm.
it. I love it. And you know that the passion and the reason why they're going into that space is because they want to invest in women-owned businesses,
Yeah.
because they see the disparities, right? I am loving this wave of women going into the tech and AI space, because that's going to matter in changing the way we use, technology in our workplaces, so that we can use some of our own intricacies as women to influence technology and how we use technology. So that's a space that if I could encourage a young woman right now, or women who are just still trying to figure out, like, okay, can I get it? Yes. In every area of your life, if you can, challenge yourself to learn something new about the technologies that impact your job. Go
Absolutely.
beyond just mastering the platforms, go beyond just mastering the systems and the workflows. Actually learn how they are made. What
Mm,
resources are they using to build those technologies? Get into all of that so that as we're talking about digital visibility, if we don't do that as women, the gap is not going to, it's not going to, you know, it's going to keep widening. So,
yes.
and then in my own area with like marketing and communications, I'm loving the conversation around AI and marketing. Like, get into it, don't get left behind. Participate in the conversations. This is why we're talking about digital visibility, because if I am not out there on LinkedIn, putting myself out there, engaging with women leaders who are in that space, we won't have the community and the spaces to talk about what we're also seeing and then be able to contribute. We won't be able to do that. So those are all the areas that for me I'm watching. And of course, looking at what's happening globally, where are the shifts happening globally? I would love to get to your point where my dream one day is to see a conference happening on the continent in Africa, where women leaders from all over the world come to the continent and they really engage in like some constructive ideation that will help girls on the continent know that we are here. We have things to say,
Mhm.
contributions to make. But all of this is because women like you and I are having these conversations and we're finding ways to give back. And so that's an area that one day I'm like, you know what? There's a wave of businesses moving to Africa right now. I just want to make sure that women and girls don't get left behind in that progress.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing sort of your perception on how what you want to, see the future of this space sort of develop into and how you're contributing to that. So yeah, thank you. And we're just about to finish up. I have just one more question for you. And for people that are watching or listening, what are just one key takeaway that you want the audience to leave with, whether that is about yourself or sort of the topic of empowering women in leadership through digital visibility? One key takeaway. What is it?
One key takeaway. That's hard for an extrovert,
I
Hannah.
know. I'm judging you.
I would say fall in love with failure. Fall in love with failure because that means you're living.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. That means you're living. And when you're living, you want to share that with other people. So then get online and tell us how you are living in your own world.
Amazing. Evelyn, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I have definitely learned a lot from this conversation, and I'm hoping that other people that are listening in also, have some inspiration from you. And just really appreciate your time today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Um, for everybody that is listening, if you want to hear some more conversations sort of along these subjects, then on Thursday, 26th of June, there is the annual meeting, which is set around the headshot concept. So we have a bunch of speakers coming in that help professionals uncover their sort of unique strengths and to help drive personal growth. So that is all from us today. And thank you to the WID Network for hosting us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Bye. I don't know.